सर को झुका के दे।
मंदिर या मस्जिदों में अब मिलती नहीं है माँ।
मंदिर या मस्जिदों में अब मिलती नहीं है माँ।
अपने ही दिल में ढूंढ ले, अपने ही दिल में ढूंढ ले, दीपक जला के दे। एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के दे। एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के दे। तंग आ चुका है तू अगर सुबह शाम शोर से।
तंग आ चुका है तू अगर सुबह शाम शोर से।
चुपचाप मौन भाव से, चुपचाप मौन भाव से नजदीक आके देख। एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के देख।
एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के देख।
माँ मुक्त कर दे पाप से, त्रिताप से हमें।
माँ मुक्त कर दे पाप से, त्रिताप से हमें।
मन बुद्धि माँ को सौंप कर, मन बुद्धि माँ को सौंप कर विश्वास ला के देख। एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के देख।
एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के देख।
फल फूल भाव जो भी दें स्वीकार है उन्हें।
फल फूल भाव जो भी दें स्वीकार है उन्हें।
श्रद्धा से प्रेम भाव से, श्रद्धा से प्रेम भाव से कुछ भी चढ़ा के देख, एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के देख,
एक बार माँ के द्वार पर सर को झुका के देख।
दिन में साथ छोड़
जय श्री माताजी, जय श्री
Can you try one more time?
Test 1, 2. Okay. Settle down and let's go.
Shri Mataji, everyone, let's settle down and all the kids, can you come up to the front? Three, two. Jai Shri Mataji, everyone, let's settle down and can all the kids please come to the front? For kids meditation.
So Ricky, you want that Kundalini? They know this. Jai Shri Mataji, everyone, let's bow down and raise up our Kundalini. Two, go. Uppy, 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 Mother Kundalini, one. Uppy, 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 Mother Kundalini, one, two. Uppy, 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 Mother Kundalini, one, two, three. Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Nabhi void, Anahata Vishuddhi, Agya, Sahasrara, Jai Shri Mataji.
सुनीता जी यहाँ कौन है यहाँ कौन है रीना में कहाँ पे और वहाँ आप चले जाओ
Let's put our right hand on the ground and say the mantra to Shree Mahakali Bhairava.
Twameva Sakshat Shri Mahakali Bhairava Sakshat Shri Adishakti Mataji Shri Nirmala.
What are the qualities of the love channel?
I forgot what to say. Mother, please.
Please remove all the leaves.
Mother, clear my left channel and all the laziness and make me joyful. Now let's clear our right channel. What? Let's say let's say the mantra of Shree Mahasaraswati and Hanumana.
Mother, please remove all of the excessive heat from our right channel and please keep us in balance.
Let's say the mantra to Shree Ganesha.
Shree Ganesha, yes. It's on. It's on. Let's put our attention on Mother Earth. Now let's put our attention on Mother Earth and let's say the mantra for Shree Ganesha. Om Tvameva Sakshat Shri Ganesha Sakshat Shri Adi Shakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namaha.
Bhumi Devi. Bhuvi Devi. Om Tameva Sakshat Bhumi Deva Sakshat Shri Adi Shakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namah. Now let's put our attention on the center channel. Let's say the mantra to Shree Gauri Kundalini. Om Swami Sakshat Shri Gauri Kundalini Sakshat Shri Adi Shakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namaha.
Jai Shree Mataji, everyone. Let us continue to stay in meditation. We will sing a Sri Ganesha Bhajan, Ganesha Ganesha, Sanskrit 16. Sumokha ekadanta Let us all stand up to welcome Shree Mataji.
बोलो श्री आदि शक्ति माता जी श्री निर्मला देवी की जय की जय की जय। जय श्री माता जी।
Shree Mataji, you are Shree Adi Shakti, the goddess of all gods and goddesses. Mother, we, the Sahaja yogis of the Greater Toronto area, request your presence with all the Devi Devtas and the Ganas to bless us. Shree Mataji, we have no words to thank you for giving all of us our self-realization. Shree Mataji, we are your flower children. On this auspicious occasion of your anniversary coming to Canada of 40 years, on the second event, Mother, please guide us. Let us relive those moments. Please establish the Canadian Sangha. Let us always be united. Shree Mataji, if we make any mistakes, knowingly or unknowingly, in conducting this small offering to your lotus feet, please forgive us. Shree Mataji, we thank you again for everything. Again and again, again and again, again and again. Jai Shree Mataji. We can now watch a talk of Shree Mataji from the first public program in Canada held at Kitsilano Secondary School in Vancouver, which happened on October 9th, 1981.
All right. Something has to happen to your awareness that you should feel. Actually, what happens when this Kundalini rises through this, these centers are represented in our hands, like in our fingers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, it is shown here, there, you can see it. And in the book that we'll give you, you will also see this thing written down. Now, these centers get enlightened. Means there are deities in all these centers. These are the milestones of our evolution. And these deities, when they get enlightened, what happens? That these also fingers get enlightened. Because they are enlightened, now in that new awareness, they start feeling the all-pervading power. Then you are surprised as you grow that that's the only truth, the rest is all falsehood. And after this, only you start doing the living work. That means you can raise the Kundalini. Now you can see the pulsation of this Kundalini here in some people. If there's an obstruction here, an obstruction there. Otherwise shoots off. It shoots off. But if there is an obstruction, it takes time. It just stops here and it tries to pump. It like sometimes I have seen like a big balloon or some sort, you can say like a heart itself pulsating. It pulsates. You can, even with the stethoscope, you can feel the pulsation going up. Now it reaches the apex here, at this fontanelle bone area, where you feel the pulsation also. Not in everyone, because I have seen people get it in a shot. Like today we had a television program with this Vancouver show. And the lady who was doing it, she said, just show me, mother, how I'll get it. And in a second she got it. Just she got it. And she said, yes, I can feel the cool breeze in my hand. She felt it. She did feel it. Now she cannot deny that she did not. And she felt the cool breeze coming out of it head and feel the cool breeze around. That's not the only thing that happens to you. When it arises, immediately you feel thoughtlessly aware. Means you become absolutely silent. When the Kundalini passes through that center, which is a very, very important center for all of us to know. I may not be able to tell you about all these centers, but you can find out from the book. It's very simple to find out and to verify. But this center is very important, where you see the red mark. But actually it is demarcating a point. In the optic chiasma, in the center of it is a very important center called as Agya Chakra. Now this Agya Chakra is the center which is adorned by Jesus Christ. This is the door, he said. This is the gate through which he has passed. And this is a very important center, because this center, you see, leads you to the limbic area, and the limbic area is the kingdom of God. So to cross this, I mean, all kinds of nonsensical things people say, that you should concentrate here. You should not. This is the window. The door is here. So those who concentrate here also spoil their Agya Chakra. You don't have to do any efforts for it. The more you do efforts, the worse it is. If you have done any efforts, it will be difficult for Kundalini to rise, because it is spontaneous, it is living. There is no effort needed. You have to have the connection with your spirit. Without getting to the spirit, you cannot have connection to the divine. That's the point where you have to reach. And the spirit resides in your heart. And the spirit is the one that is watching, is the kshetragya, as called as, means the one who is the knower of the field, is the witness within us. He is witnessing us, looking at us, how we are, noticing what we are doing. The seat of the spirit is on top of your head here, the seat. So when the Kundalini rises first, she informs the seat. And when the seat is informed, immediately the manifestation, the first manifestation of knowledge comes to you, that you start knowing there is all pervading power. You start knowing what chakras you are catching. You start knowing what others are catching. You start knowing how to raise the Kundalini and how to give realization. And the first thing that should happen to you is that physically you should feel all right. Now she asked me, how do you cure cancer and how do you cure all these things? I said, I don't cure, it's a byproduct. Because when the Kundalini rises, she passes through these centers. Now these centers are placed on the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system, left and right, the left for our emotional side and this one for our physical and this one for our mental, is this one on one side, are acting all the time, and in emergency they try to drag the energy from these centers. When the energy from these centers is taken out, then the centers become constricted, like I would say these are the centers here and left and right. But when the centers are pulled out like this, then or they are made to work too much on the sides and they get exhausted, they get constricted, and the deities also sleep off absolutely. Now the disease starts like that. Diseases are especially cancer. Cancer is started because when you become completely constricted, this part of the, say, this part or this part, especially this part, becomes absolutely independent and starts working on its own. There is no relationship with the whole. And the thing becomes on its own, a cell becomes on its own. And when it becomes on its own, it goes on increasing and sort of dominating other cells. That's how the malignancy is setting. Now when the Kundalini rises, what she does is to awaken this. By the awakening of this, it gets again its vitality, it becomes normal, it opens up and it gives energy that side and it becomes a normal being. But the main thing that happens with Kundalini is that she connects you to the whole. She connects you to the whole, the all-pervading power. And by that, all the time, the energy is flowing within you and you cannot get any disease because there is no exhaustion. Also, diseases are caused because of imbalances. For example, today I met two people who had liver problem. The liver problem, you'll be surprised, is caused by overthinking. Is not caused by anything else but overthinking. Those people who think all the time, I mean, here people are too organized. I mean, before going to any place, they sit down for 1 hour and organize it. The way we plan out everything into details and use our brains, really we have exhausted the energy of our brains. And people have made it such a crazy thing, it doesn't know what to do, it's confused. But the main thing that happens at this center, which is such an important center, which looks after our attention and which goes around the whole, is the center of creativity and supplies the energy to all the liver, then to your pancreas, then to your spleen, and then to your kidneys and uterus. This poor liver has to also convert the fat for the use of the brain, because brain and nerves are made of fat. And nowadays there's another thing started that we should not have any fats, because they say that we'll develop diabetes or something, is it? But you don't develop diabetes with fats or sugars. What you develop diabetes because of overthinking. Again, a man in a village never knows about diabetes because he doesn't think. Now what happens that this chakra, which has to do this important work of converting your fat for your brain, becomes exhausted. It doesn't look after these major organs within you, and you have all these problems, because if the pancreas goes out of order, then you develop a disease called diabetes. Then your spleen is very, very important, which people do not know how important it is. Like it comes into play in emergencies. Supposing you are eating your food and then you just run off. Then it does not know what to do. It starts pumping now more blood cells. First it is working out your digestion, then it has to work out your running about, and then you are thinking. So 3 things you are doing at the same time. Therefore that spleen becomes a crazy spleen. And such people develop a very serious disease, can develop. First they become very speedy, extremely speedy. They don't know. They are telescopically moving. Actually they move so fast that sometimes they miss everything. But the worst thing that happens to them is the blood cancer. They develop blood cancer because of this bad, or we should say the crazy spleen. All such diseases can be easily cured through the awakening of the Kundalini. Recently I went to Houston. We had about 350 people over there because I cured a multiple sclerosis fellow. Now you'll be amazed, most of these left side diseases, I call them, like cancer, multiple sclerosis, madness, and you can say this schizophrenic and all these people. This is caused mostly by the people who go to false gurus, who read such books like about the dead, about the past. All such people get this disease. Psychologists who go to psychologists, because psychology is also an authorized thing to be done. Psychologist, psychosis, and what are they called as? Those people are who, what? Analysts. Those who analyze you and go into your mind, they have no authority to do it. Now recently I saw a very nice film about cancer. And now the doctors have admitted that they have seen some sort of proteins which attack or trigger, that's the word they use, trigger cancer. And these proteins they call as protein 58, protein 59, they have given some names to them. They have even photographed them. And they said now that it comes from an area which is there, which is an unknown area, but built within us since our creation. Now beyond this point is our subconscious, and beyond that is collective subconscious.
To celebrate the awakening of the Seekers in Vancouver, Canada, on October 9th, 1981, we will sing Maharashtra Desha, or Canada Desha Jagruti Karuya, Marathi 33. So when we sing this song, instead of Maharashtra Desha, we will say Canada Desha.
जागृत करूया कवने करूया जागृति मोहे महती गयूया विनम्र होना देशा जागृत करूया कवने करूना जागृति मोहे महती गयूया विनम्र होना
We will now watch some slides and video excerpts of Canada's early yogis, Chai and Chat, recorded in October 2021 during the 40th anniversary of Sahaja Yoga in Canada.
Shree Mataji, everyone. So we'll now be doing the presentation, part 2, called The Birth of Canada. We will now watch the introduction by Auntie Meenakshi.
As we, the Global Sangha, are most joyfully celebrating the most auspicious 100th birthday of our Divine Mother, Shree Mataji Nirmala Devi, we, the Sahaja Yogis of Greater Toronto Area, are most joyfully celebrating Blossom Time, 40 years of Sahaja Yoga in Toronto, Canada. To celebrate this momentous event, we will be celebrating throughout the year, starting from just before Canadian Thanksgiving 2023 to the next Thanksgiving 2024. Please join us in our celebrations as we relive those precious moments and times with our Holy Mother in our great country and city. My name is Meenakshi Pfeiffer. I'm from Toronto Collective, and it's where I received my self-realization in June 1988. It was October 9, 1981, that Sri Adi Shakti first placed her holy lotus feet on our great country, Canada, our home and native land. On tonight's second part of many series to follow, we take you on a journey to birth of Canada. We will share with you the most precious moments and times of our early Canadian Sahaja Yogis with Shree Mataji, and how they were helped by international yogis who were indeed instrumental in this great divine work. Please join us. Shree Mataji.
Shree Mataji. So we're celebrating the 40 years of Sahaja Yoga in Toronto. And as you know, Shree Mataji first came to Canada in Vancouver. So today's series, as mentioned, is called The Birth of Canada. And this is a picture by Uncle Jay's son, Sri Daraj. He drew this at the age of 14. So it's Sri Krishna. And it says, "Welcome to Canada, Shree Mataji." As you can see, there's a lot of great detail, and it really captured the essence of Sri Krishna. So the next slide, this is an announcement of Sri Adi Shakti when she came to Canada. And she says, "You are the spirit. You can only reach the truth through your self-realization." And she grants this blessing to those who are genuinely seeking their fulfillment. And she also says, "It is your own. You cannot pay for it." So this was in Vancouver in 1981. At the Kitsilano Secondary School. So now we will listen to an interview that was on October 9th, 1981. And this is the first radio interview.
Well, Well, I have a very interesting last hour for you, and I should tell you that if you hear strange noises coming over your radio, it's because I'm surrounded by a private television set or television recorder that's recording this interview, and we have all kinds of people in here that we don't normally have. Reminds me of my first day on the air. My listeners may remember when they had all the television cameras in here and then all the lights went out. I hope that doesn't happen today. But my guest now for the next hour, and I am going to definitely invite your calls very, very soon, is Her Holiness Mataji Nirmala Devi, and she is leader of the Indian Kundalini, and I said before religion. That is not correct. It is yoga. And she is, as I told you in the before in the last hour, married to a former assistant of Mahatma Gandhi, who is now a senior United Nations official. And of course, as I say, she is the leader of this particular yoga. First of all, before I get in and display all of my ignorance, Mataji, may I just welcome you to Vancouver to CJOR.
Thank you.
I wonder if you'd speak right up into the microphone, because it is not very sensitive, and I'm going to have to test it and get it a little louder for you. Okay? There we are. Now, first of all, I read all of the material that you presented me, and it is fascinating. You have a very interesting background. Would you tell my listeners just a little bit about where you came from and a little bit of your early life history, and please tell me a little bit about Mahatma Gandhi.
I was born in a Christian family and with a purpose. Now, after that, about, say, 4 years of age, my father found that it was an emergency in our country that we should get our freedom. And he joined Mahatma Gandhi. Even my mother, all our family was involved with him. And at the age of 7 years, I went to see Mahatma Gandhi, and he liked me very much, and I stayed with him. After that, every holidays I used to go and stay with him. He was a very wonderful personality. Apart from that, that is the kind of a personality we needed in that time when there was an emergency to get our freedom back. And he was greater than many leaders because he could see that God has to play a role in getting our freedom. Not only the weapons, not only the guerrilla warfare, but it is the spirit that has to fight, and we have to take the help of God. So he took to non-violence, a method that would give him greater strength against the British, who were well equipped, and we had no way of fighting them with any kind of weapons. And the way he did it, it was so practical at that time. I mean, for people it looked as if it was very out-of-date thing to talk of non-violence against the British, but it was so practical that it proved beyond doubt that these things can work out very well, even if they sound impractical, but work out very well at a time when you find that you cannot help it otherwise.
Well, Mahatma Gandhi, of course, I've read a great deal about him, and one of the things I found interesting is that much of the Western world looks upon him as sort of an ascetic, somebody who was a very austere man, but he had, by all accounts, a very good and lively sense of humor, and was a very lively sort of a personable individual, in addition to having, of course, brought into refined form a nonviolence as a political weapon.
He was not that austere as people think him to be, but only he was austere to himself, but not for others. He was very forgiving and a very kind person. He was very fond of children. He used to call me Nepali because, according to him, my face was like a Nepali girl. And sometimes he used to talk to me in such a manner as if I was his grandmother.
Well, I gather that, Mataji, the two things that my listeners would find interesting to know about you is that, first of all, as you say, you did come from a Christian family, and secondly, I think it's fair to say a very wealthy family.
Yes, I should say that my forefathers were sort of royal family type, and then they lost all that, and then my father and his brothers came up very well. They were doing very well. And my father was a very enlightened man. Apart from the wealth part of it, he was very enlightened. He knew 14 languages. He was a master of 14 languages. And he translated Quran-e-Sharif into Hindi, and very learned man. And he was the first Indian to be elected to the Constituent Assembly and to the first assembly we had as the Central Assembly, then to the Parliament. My brother is also now a member of the Parliament. My mother was a graduate of mathematics, and she also did her law in those days. So they were quite enlightened, educated. But the great thing about my father was that he was a scholar of Sanskrit, and he had a full knowledge of the philosophy of India. which none of the Christians were allowed to read or to understand. But as he had that background, he understood the comprehensiveness of that and the whole thing, that the way it can comprehend Christianity better if you see it through that angle of meditation. Because to understand Christ, he always said, you have to, first of all, become realized. You have to become the Spirit. Otherwise, you cannot understand Christ. And because he himself was a born realized great soul, he could see that. He was a very universal person.
Well, Mataji is a world traveler.
So previously we saw Shree Mataji conducting a public program at the Kitsilano Secondary School. And this is a picture of the school on October 9th, 1981. And this is the first Canadian public program that was held. So at this first program, there were no Canadian yogis. So, yeah. This is a picture of 4 yogis. So Shree Mataji had sent Auntie Barbara to help. And Shree Mataji promised the seekers in the audience at that public program that she would find someone to teach them more of Sahaja Yoga. And it was actually Auntie Barbara who would teach from now on. And she had actually moved from Australia into the house in Vancouver where Uncle Patrick, Uncle Richard, and Uncle Mark were living. And she started actually doing these Sahaja Yoga meetings in the living room. And all 3 got their realization and became Canada's first 3 yogis, and the first ashram of Canada was formed in Vancouver. So here's a picture of the first 4 maple leaves of Canada, aka first 4 yogis in Canada. And these first 4 maple leaves of Canada, they went to the India tour in 1982 to meet Shree Mataji for the first time. And all 4 got their realization in Vancouver just a few weeks before. In fact, you can see Uncle Patrick Redican, who's from Toronto, and he was Canada's first yogi, and now he lives in India with his family. Then you have Uncle Richard Payment from BC, who now lives in the UK with his family. Then you have Uncle Mark Taylor, who is from Vancouver, and he now lives in the New Jersey, US. And sadly, Auntie Lori Wills passed away, but she was from White Rock, BC. So now there will be some collections of the early Sahaja Yogis. So we will be watching the Chai and Chat from October 2021, and then also as on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of Sahaja Yoga Canada.
We'd start an ashram, but we called it a collective house, but it turned out to be the first ashram. So we decided we're going to rent a house and we're going to find some other people to live with us and have a shared house. So we found a house, and then we found Patrick, and then Patrick found Barbara, and by the end of 1981 there were the 4 of us. And one by one, we got our self-realization. Patrick was the first. Then there was a lady who was coming from White Rock, who has passed away since, called Lori. And then there was Richard, and then there was me. And so there we were, even before we all got our realization. We were having a blast. We're living as like a family, go on day trips together, walk over to the nearest little cafe bar and play foosball and have cappuccinos. And mostly really enjoyed living together. And all the time, Shree Mataji is working her play so that finally in early January 1982, all the 4 of us Patrick, Richard, Mark, and Laurie, we go to India and we meet Shree Mataji. But we have all these interesting stories of what happened in 1981 from Patrick.
Started? What is the actual?
Well, yeah, there's a piece I just put up on, a couple of months ago. It's a piece that Richard actually wrote, and it talks about us, our beginning in Sahaja. I mean, the actual beginning is Shree Mataji coming to Vancouver on October the 9th. And giving a couple of interviews there, and then doing a program. And some of this has fortunately ended up in Amrita, so you can see the program, and you can see the radio interview that she does. And but for us, none of us was actually at that program, right?
This was in 1981. Started?
The Collective Unconscious is working through Richard and Mark. In 1981, we decided we would start an ashram, but we called it a collective house. But it turned out to be the first ashram. So we decided we're going to rent a house, and we're going to find some other people to live with us and have a shared house. So we found a house, and then we found Patrick, and then Patrick found Barbara, and by the end of 1981, there were the four of us. And one by one, we got our self-realization. Patrick was the first. Then there was a lady who was coming from White Rock, who has passed away since, called Laurie. And then there was Richard, and then there was me. And so there we were, even before we all got a realization, we were having a blast. We're living as like a family, go on day trips together, walk over to the nearest little cafe bar and play foosball and have cappuccinos, and mostly really enjoy living together. And all the time, Shree Mataji is working her play so that finally in early January 1982, all the four of us, Patrick, Richard, Mark, and Laurie, we go to India and we meet Shree Mataji. But we have all these interesting stories of what happened in 1981 from Patrick. And actually, Patrick was the one who stood behind me in December and did the formal, now you are self-realized moment with me. And do you feel that? And I said, no, I don't feel anything. But there's a story that Richard tells, which is he and I were in the middle of the city of Vancouver talking about, what about Patrick? And then at that moment, Patrick happens to appear in the city of Vancouver, like basically 500,000 people in the downtown area. And there's Patrick. So Shree Mataji was just relentless in her sending big, broad hints of who those first four were going to be. And Patrick can talk about meeting Barbara, and then anything else you want to say, Patrick?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep. Yes.
I don't know. I've lost the video, but so I can't tell. Yeah, I was sitting in the ashram, well, what was to become the ashram, 1 or 2 days after I had moved in. And we still had the ad in the paper because the house required 4 or 5 people to be viable. And this woman came to the door, and the way the door was, that people standing facing the door, we could see them side on from the front room, you see, so you could see somebody before you open the door. And I was somehow very struck right at the beginning of something about, I mean, the woman seemed to me beautiful, but not in any sort of any way that implied, you know, sort of romantic or sexual or anything like that. It was just actually beautiful, you see. And I mean, that was my very first sight of her. And then I invited her to, and then we sat down on the table and talked. And all the time I'm struck by how different she looks, you see. And we're talking about a lot of things. We went into sort of very deep conversation right at the beginning, talking about things sort of spiritual and that. And I was struck that she seemed to know more about what she was talking about than I did. And that wasn't a very common experience for me, that I would think that. And I just felt that she was clearer on things, you see. So eventually she left, and I phoned up Richard and said, you know, you got to talk to her, because I think there's something really about her, you know. I think this is somebody we want. And I think that she originally decided not to move in, but then wherever else she was going to go, it turned out to be a little bit odd. And then she opted for us. And she had been sent by Shree Mataji to do the follow-up on the program. Shree Mataji actually says this in the public program on the 9th. She says, right at the beginning, she says, we're not going to be able to do follow-up now, but I'll send someone from abroad to come and do the follow-ups. And so she had a list of, 20 or 30 names of people that had said that they wanted to do follow-up for the Sahaja Yoga. And she was contacting these people, and we were going around and arranging a hall and doing various things. And I was helping her, and not that I knew much about Vancouver because I was new to it, but I just had the time. I was between jobs, and on the last day, the day of the program, I asked her if it was all right if I came to the program, because I was sort of under the impression it was only for people that had been to Shree Mataji's program. And she said, fine, you know. And so the program happened, and it was quite a large turnout. I mean, more than she'd been expecting. It was 30 or 40 people, you see. And at that time, and for a few years after this, when we gave realization, we gave each person realization individually. Sahaja Yogi would go and stand behind the person that would, each individual, and raise their kundalini and bandhan them and check their vibrations, you see. So she's faced with 40 people, and there's just her. And she said, I can't do this by myself. You have to help me. And I said, well, fine. But the odd thing about this, that I didn't quite realize at the time, but I realized afterwards, was I hadn't actually officially got my realization. But here I was giving other people their realization, and I didn't really expect it to work. I'd been to different programs. I mean, these programs were all over the place. They probably still are. Somebody comes and, some friend or something says, oh, come along and see this, you see. And I'd been to a few And I was very skeptical. And I never felt anything or had any experience at any of them. And I thought, well, this is what's going to happen here, you see. So I said, what do you want me to do? And she said, well, you feel the person, you feel their chakras. And of course, we had the chakra chart with the color coded, on the hand and on the chakras, which is very useful. And so she said, and then when you bund on them or you clear them, you see. So I did this, what I was told. I mean, say somebody's catching right heart, and I'm surprisingly feeling something on my right heart. And then I'm bundoning it, and I'm surprisingly feeling it clear. And you could see, in some cases, the kundalini throbbing on the spine and moving up the spine or moving from chakra to chakra. It was quite stunning. It was quite amazing. Especially since, like I said, I never had any sort of extrasensory experience before this, you see. And then that eventually we managed to give everybody the realization, and we went back to the ashram, or to the house. It's not yet an ashram, but it's already halfway there, anyways. And she gave me a picture of Shree Mataji, and it wasn't the standard picture like Edward was just showing.
But
story. So then after you all went to India, so Lori and you and Mark and Ed was not there yet. So Richard, the four of you went to India, and then Richard got married that year, right? So that was like January 1981, 82, January 82. So Shree Mataji came in October 1981, and then.
First, the four of us went to England,
Yes.
and that's where we met Felicity. And then the four of us, first we went to England, and the four of us met Felicity in London. And then the four of us went to India, where we arrived in Mumbai. And one by one, we went up on a stage at the end of a public program and introduced ourselves to Shree Mataji. So when I went up on the stage, I was at Shree Mataji's left foot, and Patrick was at her right foot. And we rested our hands on the floor of the stage with our palms up. And Shree Mataji lifted up her left foot and placed it on my two palms. And she said, sometimes it takes a long time. And then sitting next to her on the stage and watching her with other people, I had this knowing inside me. And it was not quite as clear as Patrick's knowing, but somehow I knew that whatever she asked me to do, I would just do it. And it was just my beginning of then spending 3 months in the company of Shree Mataji in India and in England.
Wow. Cool.
So when you went to England, Mark, initially, so story. So then.
So then Sahaja was also spreading in Montreal, and this is a picture of Montreal, Quebec. And eventually it also spread to Charlottetown, PEI.
Hi. So, I mean, the other piece of the early history of Canada is that Shree Mataji decided she would start Canada in Vancouver. And then Patrick went to Toronto. Oh, and how did you end up in Toronto, Patrick?
Well, I was from Toronto, right? And so I asked Shree Mataji if I could go to Toronto and try to start up Sahaja Yoga there. And she said, okay. And so I was there for about more than a year from I think September 1982, and she came to Toronto in October 1983. Can you hear me properly?
Yep.
Yep, all right. And I mean, I knew a lot of people in Toronto, and I told a lot of people about Sahaja Yoga, but nobody I knew personally came into Sahaja Yoga. And that surprised me because they were seekers, but somehow they couldn't get, there was something they couldn't get over. And I also did public programs. It's just like Vancouver. It was really easy to do public programs in these cities. You could go into any library and rent a room, and putting up posters wasn't a problem, and that sort of thing, you know. And some people would come out. But we really didn't, by the time Shree Mataji came in October 83, we were like 2.5 Sahaja Yogis, right? There was Michael Knight was there with me, and he'd been doing it for about a year. He was sincere and he stuck on. And just before Shree Mataji came, there was a fellow living in the same house with me, a fellow named Paul Borg, and he suddenly became interested, and he said that he could act as Shree Mataji's driver when she came. And then he decided his car wasn't good enough, and he went out and rented a fancier car to drive her around. And so there were 3 of us in the end. And then Shree Mataji did like you were talking about there in Vancouver.
So this is a picture of Niagara Falls, and Shree Mataji has said that Niagara Falls is a Swayambhu. And if you go there, you can really feel the vibrations. And Niagara Falls represents Sri Vishnu Maya. So if you've ever have a chance to go there, you can really feel the vibrations, and it's really just a very peaceful and calming place to go.
That in 1990, when Shree Mataji did the Saraswati Puja in Vancouver, she said one of the reasons that she was doing that puja there was that Vancouver was one of the most beautiful places of nature in the whole world.
Wow.
Say that in 1990.
So this is a picture of Halifax. So this is also another place in Canada. And Sahaja Yoga eventually also spread to Halifax.
But Vancouver has the Swayambhu, the lions, the beautiful, they call in the native Indian language, the story, it's the 2 sisters. And Shree Mataji said that because of this Swayambhu, it protects Vancouver. And we could see that none of the false gurus really established themselves ever in Vancouver, whereas in Victoria it was so hard to try to establish Sahaja Yoga there. We went so many times, public programs, yogis would sort of come and stick on. Sorry?
Somebody has the microphone on by mistake. If everyone can turn it off, that would be great. Thank you. Please continue, Felicity. It's a beautiful story.
Yes, so these two mountains, face each other. So the English gave them the name of the lions because it reminded them of the stone lion statues in Trafalgar Square. But actually the native Indian story it's of two sisters who perform very selfless, heroic acts of valor, and they were immortalized in these mountains as rock to inspire others in their not tribes, but of their people, to inspire them to be these more spiritual people. So it's a very beautiful native story behind it. And, they sit overlooking this great Cleveland, which has now been dammed, but it's this gorge and this amazing lake which leads now into this dam, and it's a very beautiful spot. And it's interesting, Patrick, you saying that about worshipping, because I used to go sit there and you just feel this beautiful reverence and love for this nature, these mountains. And it really made sense when we heard Mother say, these mountains are protecting Vancouver, and you could feel that.
So this is a picture of Lions Bay, and it's a Swayambhu. I will read something that Lori Wills wrote about Lions Bay. In the year 1990, the Sajyogis of the Vancouver area were privileged to host Shree Mataji for another public program and puja. Shree Mataji arrived at midday, and we washed her feet and did arti to welcome her. She commented so sweetly that we were all becoming experts in the protocols. The public program held that evening in downtown Vancouver was very successful, and several hundred people again got their realization. Shree Mataji seemed very pleased with the turnout. We have been informed a couple of months ahead of time that Shree Mataji had given her blessings for us to do puja to her in her aspect of Sri Saraswati, and had spent long hours building and preparing. It was decided that the best location for the puja would be on the grounds surrounding the ashram, on a small acreage high above and overlooking the small islands of Burrard Inlet. Very private, with a western view over the water and with virtually no close neighbors. We rented a pendal to cover Shree Mataji's chair and stage, and set up seating on Mother Earth for our visiting brothers and sisters. We prayed for clear, warm weather. On the Saturday evening, there was a fierce thunder and lightning storm. The electricity went off, and we had to quickly gather candles to light the large open area inside the ashram where Shree Mataji was speaking to us. Throughout the storm that evening, in the surrounding area, there were a total of 16,000 lightning strikes. The following day, the major newspapers contained many photos and write-ups describing this most unusual natural phenomenon. At one point during the storm, one of the yogis reported that a bolt of lightning had passed very close to the window of Shree Mataji's room, just next to where Shree Mataji was sitting. She was just laughing throughout the storm and commenting about the power of Vishnu Maya. The puja day was warm and beautiful, everything freshly cleansed by the rains of the previous evening. The puja was attended by nearly 100 of us, with visiting yogis and yoginis from as far away as Europe and from all areas of North America. Beautiful gifts of native art, including intricate soapstone carvings, were offered. So this was written by the late Lori Wills, who was one of the first Sahaja of Canada, and she was from White Rock. I've been to Lions Bay, and it's really hard to try and think because you're just in complete thoughtless awareness. So that's another Swayambhu that is very important to visit if you have not had the chance to.
I used to have a connection to the ocean there. The ocean, which we know as the grandfather. Whenever I was alone and on my own, I would just go to the ocean. And it was really, I came back after 7 years and I saw the ocean. I felt like we just hugged each other like this. It was so powerful, you know, this massive, like a god, you know, there. And once you get the rapport with it, it's like, nothing like it, you know.
Yeah, I think it's everywhere it's important. In Canada, I think, and places like that, it's absolutely key, because what has Canada got? It's got this huge unconscious area that has to be brought into consciousness. I mean, all the taiga and all the tundra and all the lakes and all these places where the population is very small, right? And this is for the whole world. I mean, not just for Canada, right? But it's that's there, you see. And I mean, after all, I mean, if Canada is the place of Shree Vittal, then Canada is the Virat. You see? And the Virat is what becomes enlightened. The heart comes up into the brain, and the whole Virat becomes enlightened. Right?
Yes, we have 10 million square kilometers, almost 10 million square kilometers, and of course, 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Arctic.
Yeah.
So there's significant, significant space that we do need to meditate on it.
I think the nature is...
connect with it, you know? Not that it's just a meditation, but like Ed was saying, you need to connect with it, you know? I mean, one of the things I remember in Vancouver is coming out of the front step and looking up and seeing the mountain. I thought that was the most wonderful thing about Vancouver. They did in the morning, as you walk out of the house, there was this great big mountain in front of you. You see, I thought that was tremendous, you know?
Yeah, I definitely...
I used to have a
that has sustained me through everything.
Wow. I had my big breakthrough in '85 in San Diego. Sorry. You guys were in San Diego, right, Mark?
We drove down, over and over again, because it was just down the coast, just 1,000 miles or something. And we would drive down to San Diego to see Shree Mataji.
2000.
Yeah, in '85, I had been in exile in Canada, in Vancouver, and suddenly I was in front of Shree Mataji's in a living room. They just created an ashram there, and everybody was allowed to go forward and wash her feet, like massage the feet in puja. And I just went from the bottom right all the way to the top, just like that, bang. And at the end of that year, then I went to India and got married. So San Diego was really special somehow. It was like magical. I think it's like, isn't it the Muladhara of America? Muladhara chakra?
Yes.
San Diego? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a real breakthrough place there for me.
We had Buddha Puja. We had Buddha Puja there in 85 or 86.
86.
Yeah, on the sand, under tents, with a huge wind. And it was Buddha Puja. They made this beautiful bodhisattva tree for Mother to sit on.
Oh, yeah, I saw that, yeah.
They called for saris to decorate the stage, as they did in those days. And I didn't have anything special, I didn't have any of those beautiful silk embroidery saris, but I had this plain silk pattern sari. But anyway, I thought maybe they can use it somehow. So I sent it up, and then during the puja, I noticed, you saw it was very beautifully done. And I saw that my sari hadn't been used. And I thought, that's okay. Because you knew if your sari was used, in the puja, it absorbed all these amazing vibrations from the puja. So it was a really special blessing. And so I just felt, it's okay, that's all right. And then at the end of the puja, after the puja was over and we were standing up, and I suddenly realized that actually my sari had been used to wrap the cushion on which Mother's feet rested. And on my altar,
That was hard luck, right?
I know. I still have this most beautiful, precious sari. But that was such an incredible puja because, every time Shree Mataji came, when she started coming like every year, and she would do these 4 corners of North America, Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles, and that year it was San Diego and New York. No, it would, so not 4 corners, but obviously very important places. And sometimes she would go this way round, and sometimes she would go that way round. And you were always in Vancouver trying to manage, if she's here, will I have time to drive? A lot drove because it was, a long way. But that was a really special puja. And after the puja, as was so common in those days, the mums would come up with the new babies, for their names, which was so lovely. And in that puja, she actually was naming so many of them from Sri Hanuman names. And I remember Anjana got her name, and then my son at the time had a different name. Mother had not had an opportunity to name him because he'd been born when we were in Vancouver and she was in Europe. And he'd been asking why he didn't have an Indian name like his sister. And I suddenly saw, all the babies going up with their names, and I said, I thought, maybe this is the right time, And I turned to him. So he's just this little 4.5-year-old, and I said, if you would like a name, now is the time. I think, you can go up and ask Shree Mataji. And he said, oh, Mum, you come with me. And I thought, I turned to someone, and I said, he'd like a name. And he's asking me, I don't know, it's appropriate. And she looked at me and she said, I think he's already asking. And I turned around and he was there up on the stage. And I turned around and there was Shree Mataji holding his little hands. And she just, she would often she would just go into meditation, when she was finding the right name for the child or the baby. And she went very quiet. And then she just said, Gautama. His name should be Gautama, which is Buddha's name, which means the enlightened one, which was so special, for him. And all the names, from Shree Mataji. And maybe I can interject. When Shree Mataji first started naming babies in England, it was quite a big thing and she started with Greek names. So I remember Maureen's first child, she called Gavin's first child, she called Olympia. And then Maureen's first child was called Athena. And then someone else's child was called Marina. And then there was Innocent. And then she started moving into the Sanskrit names. And at that time, in very English England, who looked down on India still, they'd been their colony in a way, not colony, but, they had thought that they had subjugated them. Yeah. And suddenly we had these Indian names coming into our families. And so it started to work out all the conditionings of the grandparents who weren't Sahajogis. And Shree Mataji explained that you could feel the importance of using these beautiful Sanskrit names. They were mantras. So every time you use the name for the child, it was like a mantra going out into the ether, into the vibrations. And it took some courage to, stick to using the name Mother had given and not to use any Western names. And people would look at you, oh, how do you say that? What name is that? It was the first time that Sanskrit words were being introduced and going into the general public. So, it's a little memory of how times have changed now, the world is so much more international. The schools are more international. So many more different names, and but it was one of those little things, seemingly little things that Shree Mataji did that actually had a really deeper vibrational, spiritual importance. So it went on for many years, this beautiful bringing up the babies and mother giving names. And eventually, by the time we got to the twins, so that was 15 years later, Shree Mataji had stopped, and it was like, you can choose the name, you can choose the name. But it's nice to understand why so many of the children had the Sanskrit names and the importance that mother gave to the giving of the names.
Well, one small thing I'll add to that, just because it's so funny you say this, and it reminds me of a story of my sister Seema when she was in India school, and she had the chance to be in front of Shree Mataji as well, like similar to what Gautama was, but she was already almost 11 or 12, but she somehow wanted to be Shree Mataji as well, and so she was sitting there on the stage, and she was watching all these other younger children who were at school getting names from Shree Mataji, and then she went up to Shree Mataji and said, "Can I also have a name?" Shree Mataji looked at us. "Well, you have a beautiful name. Your name's Seema. It's okay. You don't need another name." But then she went and sat down, so completely disappointed, And Mataji looked at her and could see that she was disappointed. She said, "Okay, I'll give you a name." And she said, "Saraswati." And it's so funny today. She plays sitar, and she's very into that musical instrument. So it's like she gives a peek also, like the names are so significant. We don't understand how it works. And you're right. It's such a small thing, but she's giving you so much knowledge into that small story. But when you said it, I couldn't remember.
The bigger picture. There's always, every little thing mother did, sometimes seemed like a little thing, but there was so much more behind it always. That's lovely. And so sometimes she didn't. Sometimes, as you said, she would say, no, this is a nice name. This suits you. And in the very early years, there were some people called Paul. And she said, no, you have to change your name, Paul, because from the Bible, he had such a bad. She said he was really a Russian. So you can't have that name, Paul. But I'm sure all that is worked out now. A lot of things that Shree Mataji did in those early years to work things out so that we didn't need to worry about it later. Just this little story about drinking Coca-Cola. So we came into Sahaja Yoga, and of course, for my generation, don't drink Coca-Cola, don't go to McDonald's, that kind of stuff. Shree Mataji would just do all these little tricks to break all these conditionings. And Christine Trumbo tells this wonderful story that Shree Mataji she drank Diet Coke. She would order from McDonald's. So to give a bit of context, in the early years, if she'd invited us to her flat or we were out or somehow, and suddenly, she would know that people were hungry. And she would say, okay, we'll get some food. We'll order from McDonald's. You go down and get me a fish burger. She was and order from McDonald's. And at first everyone was like kind of, but mother says, so we have to, eat these things. And then gradually that worked that conditioning out. Okay, so you don't eat McDonald's every day, but sometimes you have it. It's okay. It was all about balance, being balanced.
I have a Coca-Cola story. Here's my Coca-Cola story. Once somebody said to Shree Mataji, "Shree Mataji, I notice you're drinking Coca-Cola." And Shree Mataji looked at the glass she was holding and she said, "Actually, I can drink poison." And Linda has a story about names.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing about names. Of course, we're telling all these stories about what happened years ago, but I just want to kind of say to the people who weren't there at the time that she's still, of course, talking to us now. And about 2 years ago in a dream, Shree Mataji called me Madhavi. So I woke up and said, I have a new name.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Surprise.
And without cutting that short, which is such a beautiful story, to round up the Coca-Cola. So eventually, I can't remember exactly, but Christine told me how she was talking with Shree Mataji about her husband and about drinking Coke. And Shree Mataji said, "Oh, don't worry about drinking Coke now. I've worked it all out. It's safe now for humans to drink." So that was pretty impressive that all those years she'd been drinking this, as you said, poison.
Poison.
And clearing it for us to drink.
Wow.
Yeah. Not that we should all run out and drink Coca-Cola all the time. Anyway.
I wanted to,
I'll
I think
pass
it's funny, Auntie Linda just talked about bringing it to current time period as well. And I just recently went back to Vancouver, actually just at the beginning of September. My daughter's studying there. And one of the things that you said before, Auntie Felicity, which was the Shree Mataji's room is there. And that they've really pristinely kept it and put all these things in there that Auntie Laurie started back when she was there. We went into that room and Shree Mataji is absolutely, her presence is 100% there. And it was so strong. And I think it's really important that we remember we still have these things in our own backyard, like in Canada. And that, you know, I was saying to a lot of Canadians, you know, we can't travel to US right now. We're actually not allowed to travel to by car. You can fly, but we can make vacations to Canada, and to go to the ashram that we have in Vancouver would be such an opportunity right now. And to go into that room and just meditate is just absolutely phenomenal. You can't stay there long. It's so strong. You sit for a few minutes there and you feel like, now I have, you're in Mother's presence. It's the same feeling, you know, you have to kind of at some point just be, the protocol is to kind of walk back and let it be, but it's really just so strong. And I just wanted to, you know, share that with everybody who's listening today.
So it was interesting that you mentioned that, because I heard that they were sending cards to Mother's Room, and I suddenly thought, oh, I think we should tell the story of how that room came about. And
Good.
so it was from one of the visits, the many, you know, that group of visits from Mother came. And it was a very, it was a very special visit. And Shree Mataji was actually staying in a hotel in town, but she came to the ashram, which was, you know, a fair drive out from the inner city. And we received her. We'd actually taken the back gate off so that they could drive the car in through the garden, because the front of the house had a lot of steps. So we didn't want Mother coming up the steps. So they took the back fence, half the back fence off, so that Mother's car could drive across the grass to the back door, which just had one little step, and they put a ramp. So Shree Mataji could enter the ashram that way. And so she came in and she sat in the main floor in the living room that is there in her chair. And they bought red roses for everybody. So every single person got to give a red rose and go to Shree Mataji's feet. And it was so special always when Mother came, because we hadn't seen her for a whole year, you know, and she would come. And during that year, there would always be personal things, personalities, situations, you know, it's normal. It's Sahaja life would come up. And then you just know, oh, Mother's coming. It will all clear out. It will all work out. And by the time, and sometimes you could still feel some things in the atmosphere, you know, we'd have public program, sometimes we'd have puja, and then you'd go to the airport and you'd sit at Mother's feet just as before she leaves, and she'd be chatting. And then as she would get up to go through the gates to the airplane, I would feel like it's all lifted. It's all lifted. It's like we got reset, rebooted for the next year. And this particular occasion was really very beautiful. New people got to come and meet her and give her the roses. And then they had prepared this room, the small room next to the kitchen, and they had turned the bathroom completely, made it beautiful for Mother's use only. And it had been prepared as a restroom for her. So they had set it up with her bed and, you know, beautiful things for her. And so she went and she laid down in this room, and we were all sent out into the garden so that nobody would disturb her by being in the house. And I went out, and I remember I was sitting in the garden, and suddenly I just felt like waves of vibrations coming out from Mother's room, just waves like an ocean, just flowing over us, just washing us with vibration. And I remember looking up into the sky and sort of across the garden fence into the road. And it felt like we were completely in this bubble. You know, we were in the bubble of the divine, and the world was out there. And we were in this bubble of vibrations. And after Mother left and then later went back to hotel and left the country, it was decided that this room would forever be Mother's room. and was left set up like that. And as Mohan said, it's a small room, but I've had the experience of being in Shree Mataji's house early in England where Mother lived. And I remember when you walk into where Mother's living, it's such a unique feeling. It's hard to put words on. The only way I could describe it is that I felt like I was in Mother's womb, like I'm just surrounded with her vibrations and love and care. And when I go into that room, I feel the same, like Mohan said, Mother is there, you know. It's very special, and you don't need to be there long, but, you know, and we spent many times sleeping on the floor around Mother's bed. The ladies would be invited into her room to sleep with her, because when we were staying in the early years, we stayed in people's flats. They would host her, and the men would be in the living room, and Mother would invite the ladies in because there was not space. And that same feeling of just sitting in front of the altar in Vancouver, in Mother's room beside her bed, it's really special. And we're very blessed. There's not every country has that beautiful gift that, you know, Mother gave us, that she came and she just vibrated the whole place. And she bought this ashram, and she said that she was buying this ashram to establish Shree Ganesha. We needed an ashram to establish Shree Ganesha for not just for Vancouver. She also bought the house in LA, and she said that having her houses at this down the west coast at the top and the bottom would prevent the fault. You know, it's on a fault line, and they're always in danger of earthquakes, that it would prevent the earth from falling into the sea. So it's a very beautiful place. And on behalf of, as Mohan said, on behalf of all the Vancouverites, and where we used to live in the ashram, I know everyone, it is a house for all Mother's children, and particularly Canadians, and everyone is welcome to go. And in fact, I was there recently, and I've been in Chelsham Road in London, which was the first ashram, the first house, the first temple. Mother said this is the first temple in history to a living deity. And so many pujas and weddings in Chelsham Road in London. The vibrations are amazing. And we had a young couple came to visit London, and I took them to the ashram. I thought, I want to give them this special experience of being there. And we meditated all together. And afterwards they said, oh, it's just like being in Vancouver ashram. And I I was a bit shocked, you know, I went, oh, really? And then I was back there last year in this spring, and I went in and I was meditating, and I went, he's right. It is like Chelsham Road. Somehow Mother has blessed us with this incredible depth of vibration in the ashram. And I know Toronto has a beautiful center too, but, you know, anyway, this house with Mother's bedroom, and it's a bit of a special place.
When I heard, I think that was 95, right? I heard Shree Mataji had bought an ashram in Canada. I thought, oh, wow, probably Toronto. Oh, Vancouver. And then I heard it was Surrey, where I grew up and where I spent my youth. You know, I used to steal cars in that area. And I was like, I couldn't believe Surrey had such a bad reputation, you know.
It did.
It was 22 blocks from my mom's house, you know, where I grew up, where I went to high
it was
school.
it was the one place that we'd never had ashram, because it was a kind of a rundown place. But then all the Indians started coming, Indians from India, and moving into that area, and the whole vibration just started to change. You know, they brought this sense of family and good nabis, and Shree Mataji bought her house in this Indian area.
Yeah, it was a nice built up area.
You know, it's a beautiful house, and this year you'll be so happy to know that the yogis did a lot of work on the inside, renovating, as well as the yuvas. They did a lot of work in the garden, so it's quite upgraded.
wow.
So we'll make sure that photos are shared with you all, so you can see the progress of Sad Yoga.
My sons were sending us photos, and one of my sons has just gone back, and he just got married actually in Cabela. And I said to him, why are you going back and not going to live with your wife? And he said, Mum, because there's projects we started in the garden, and I need to go back and help finish them, so it's done properly.
Nice.
it's really amazing
so
to me that
congratulations, Felicity.
Thank you.
Devendra's marriage.
Yeah, you continue, Mark. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
What amazes me is William Blake's writing that the lamps will be lit in Surrey.
In the Surrey
And
Hills, right?
was he writing about England? And it turns out that the
Well,
first
he was
yogis
writing it.
are
He
from
Yeah.
Surrey, White Rock, and Delta, all of which are sort of contiguous. And then where does Shree Mataji purchase an ashram? Surrey.
It's true. I hadn't made that connection until you made it this year. You know, we know that the divine has many layers of subtlety and vibration. I'm sure. Yeah, there you are.
Well, I would think,
three of
you
the
know,
three of the early five are all from the Surrey area.
Amazing.
Well, I was thinking, Mark,
And I
after
should say,
you
I
said
grew
this.
up. Sorry, I just finished. I just remembered. I was born in Richmond, in Surrey, in England.
Oh.
And I moved to
Yeah,
Vancouver.
I grew up in Richmond and Surrey in the Vancouver area. Richmond and Surrey.
Whoa.
Amazing.
Mark, I was thinking you said this, and I didn't catch it at the time, but then you sent out the tape of that conversation, and I watched it, and I heard it then. And I think, I mean, one of Shree Mataji's complaints when she was asked about what the nature of the place she was in, people would say, what she would say, well, it's hard to tell because the names aren't right in North America. You see, the names weren't right because the Europeans, mostly the English to begin with, just came over and stuck the name on of whatever place they came from, right? But it could work out right too, couldn't it? Somebody could have felt that the vibrations there were the same as the vibrations in Surrey in England, and given that name, you see. So that, I mean, God knows. I mean, if you name 10,000 places, you've got to get the odd one right, right?
Actually, I heard the story. The guy was in New Westminster, which is across the river, and he looked over to the wilderness of Surrey, and he said, that just looks like looking over the Thames to Surrey on the south side of the Thames. And so they said, Surrey, it's Surrey.
but the fact that the quote from Blake, so jealous.
O Holy Mother, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for blessing us with Blossom Time and for giving birth to Sahaja in Canada, thus enabling all Canadians to get their second birth. Many pranams, Jai Shree Mataji.
We thank you, Shree Mataji, for blessing Canada on October 9th, 1981. We also thank the early yogis of Canada for their dedication in establishing Sahaja in Canada. We will now sing Awaaz Utayenge, Hindi 62. We can now stand up for Aarti. We request Rinanti to offer the Aarti on behalf of Canada. त्वमेव साक्षात् Let us remain in silent meditation for a few moments. O Queen of the Universe, Param Pujya Shree Mataji, we have no words, no expressions to thank you enough, to express our gratitude toward your lotus feet. for giving us our self-realization, for being present here with all the Devi Devtas and the Ganas. Shree Mataji, from our hearts, we thank you for coming to Canada, for placing your lotus feet on this land and making it the true Great North. Shree Mataji, please open our hearts so that we can encompass the whole world within it, so that we can spread your vibrations, your vision throughout the world, wherever we go. Shree Mataji, let us always remember that our place is at your lotus feet. Please strengthen our connection with your lotus feet. Let us always remain at your lotus feet, united as one Sangha. Shree Mataji, if we've made any mistakes, knowingly or unknowingly, in performing this small offering to your lotus feet, please forgive us. We thank you again for everything, Shree Mataji. Thank you, Shree Mataji. Jai Shree Mataji. We will now sing a bhajan, O Queen of Universe, English 12.
We start?
O Queen of Universe, O Queen of Universe, O Shakti of Lord Shiva, we surrender to you, we adore you, and keep you in our hearts. O Queen of Universe, O Queen
surrender to you. We adore you and keep you in our hearts. Oh, Queen of Vishuddhi, oh, Queen of Vishuddhi, oh, Mother of Shri Krishna. We surrender to you. We adore you and keep you in our hearts. Oh, Queen of Agya, oh, Queen of Agya, oh, Mother of Jesus Christ. We surrender to you. We adore you and keep you in our hearts. Oh, Queen of Sahasrara, oh, Queen of Sahasrara, oh, Shri Nirmala Ma. We surrender to you. We adore you and keep you in our heart. Oh, Queen of Holy World, oh, Queen of Holy World, oh, Adi Shakti Ma. We surrender to you. We adore you and keep you in our hearts. Oh, Queen of Universe, oh, Queen of Universe, oh, Shakti Allah Shiva. We surrender to you. We adore you and keep you in our hearts. Mataji, Mataji, your face shines like 1,000 suns. You have given us more than we could ask for. Bliss and peace and harmony. Mataji, Mataji, your face shines like 1,000 suns. You have given us more than we could ask for. Bliss and peace and harmony. Mataji, Mataji, your face shines like 1,000 suns. You have given us more than we could ask for. Bliss and peace and harmony. Mataji, Mataji, your face shines like 1,000 suns. You have given us more than we could ask for. Bliss and peace and harmony. Mataji, 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 Mataji,
We can now raise our Kundalini, give a bandhan, and do namaskar. Jai Shree Mataji. Thank you everyone for joining this evening's special program in person and online to celebrate the birth of Sahaja Yoga in Vancouver, Canada on October 9th, 1981. Next Saturday on October 7th, please join us again for Blossom Time, celebrating 40 years of Sahaja Yoga in Toronto and for Thanksgiving dinner. Also for today, let us enjoy a collective